So for anyone who's listening, the purpose of this is really to better understand the doctoral research that is so exciting, just like Hans, that is going on at the iSchool at Syracuse. And my name is Sarah Bratt, and I am a current doctoral candidate studying cyber infrastructure at Syracuse. And I have here with me today another doctoral student, and Han, who is going to describe his really cool research today. So welcome, Han.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me, and it's my pleasure to be interviewed by you, and it's my pleasure to be a part of this event. And my name's Han. I come from China, and I want to introduce a little bit about my research. So it is about science. So basically, I study science of science. We study statistical relationships in science. That's my approach. Some other people do other kinds of study to study science, but a major group in science of science research is conduct large-scale statistical analysis on data. So that's pretty much what I do.
I love that. I'm so curious about what kinds of questions or topics that you focus on, because I know in the past you've looked at like peer review maybe, and some other those interesting topics, but I don't know what you're currently working on. What is the project that you're really excited about that you're working on right now?
I'm working on a project recently is about misleading graphs in science. So some figures are manipulated to deliver certain information to audience. And so the goal of this project is we want to detect misleading graphs in science. So we choose some publications. We used COVID, like the archive for COVID, and we run analysis on COVID, and we try to see if we can find any misleading graph on COVID publications. And also we have a plan to conduct more larger scale analysis on publications, like beyond COVID publications.
And that's super interesting because I wonder if all misleading graphs resemble each other in a particular way. Would you mind describing what you found in terms of those misleading features or characteristics?
So actually, I'm not a visualization researcher. I just follow the principles they proposed, and those principles and the one we follow is well established and is easy to execute, like easy to we can transform this principle of proportional ink. So this is if a bar chart violates the proportional ink principle, then this graph should be a misleading graph, because if you take a bar chart, we expect each bar represent the actual number on the axis, right? So if you shrink the bar chart, then the effect will disappear or will be different. So some big difference can be small, some small big difference can be presented in another way. So this kind of figure are manipulated, and our cognition process cannot tell the difference. And some researchers in I think it's psychology, and they conducted a study about those kind of graph, the strengthened bar charts. They can tell a different story to people, and people cannot be aware of this problem. So even though but fortunately, the misleading graph is not prevalent in science, but we do find some. So even though some figures, even though it's relatively, it is a small proportion of figures can be misleading, but we should be aware of that some audience, they don't have the knowledge and they don't have the experience to recognize those figures. And they're like, for example, undergrads like this just started to read papers. If they encounter those kind of figures, I think they're better to recognize it. So our purpose is not we can find some misleading graph. And another thing through this project is we want to demonstrate that that we have this problem and ask journals and or editors to be aware of this problem. They can do some check, and also let more people know this kind of problem to aware and to avoid be manipulated by those figures.
Yeah, I think often what happens, like you said, it's very subliminal, almost like subconscious, that we don't recognize that we are coming to some conclusion based on perhaps the proportions of some figure, especially if we're doing something like, some of my research is focusing on this information overload problem. And when we skim through papers, sometimes it's easy to come to conclusions, even as a researcher, or perhaps as like you pointed out, like a new undergrad. And so this question of just to go a little bit broader, I'm wondering, you talk about misleading graphs, but I wonder if there's this is under an umbrella of a broader question about sort of the reliability of science, or if this is a question about misleading, or if there's other aspects of misleading science, or perhaps the validity and veracity of science that you investigate in your research.
To be honest, I'm not the initializer of this project. I was just guided by Daniel Kuna, my advisor. He proposed this idea, and I just planned and execute this project. But I think from his perspective, he has a how to say agenda about misinformation in science. So some information on science can be problematic. Like, for example, some figures might misreused, or part of the figure are misreused by other people, so that they have some, it's a misconduct. Like, we have seen those cases if you go to the Office of Research Integrity website. So some cases are released, like those who did this kind of manipulation. So, and also Daniel has another project, is about citation. So he can detect miscitation, what is some citation is missing, and some sentence should need a citation to back up. So I think that's his agenda, and because I'm his graduate assistant, so I have to do that job for him. But I can introduce my own like research also, but this is the project I'm working on this week, so I will introduce this project.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's great. And it's so interesting because you work with a large lab, right? You work with people that are all, in the time of not COVID, all co-located, kind of working on this computational approach to science of science. And and that like style of working seems to be rigorous and challenging, but also like quite rewarding. What's the name of the lab again?
Oh, Science of Science and Computational Discovery.
Science of Science, SOSCD.
Yeah.
Well, you said a little bit like, oh, in my research. So could you talk a little bit about maybe what you're thinking for your own research, and maybe a dissertation, or?
Oh yeah, my own research is like let me see. So I study the generalizability of science. So like we can, if we take a look at the history of science, we can see that we have some well-known theory, and at some point those theory like was disappear, not disappear, they become a history. People don't use that theory, but some people still cite those theory, but they don't use it to guide their own research anymore, because we can see the series, like for example, in science communication, like how science communication, how science communication change over time is also is explained by different theories. Some people say, oh, it is one-way dissemination, and then people did some other research, and then they say, oh, it's a dialogue between science and the public, and people can even more like, there are multi-way, or they can. So the series are evolving with data. So now today we have more and more data. Like we have like internet, we have like phones. So we have much more data than before. And how can this data challenge the previous theory? Because previous theory maybe depend on the experiments.
Mm.
So, but now we have those kind of data are observational, so they are not from experiment. What can those data tell? And can will science change by those data? Because like we see more and more new data appear, and the understanding of society and human life might also change, as discussed in the science communication. After people do more and more study, the theory change also. So, so the how to interpret a theory, how to design a new theory, how to let a theory generalizable to new data is the question I'm interested in.
So that's super interesting, but I wonder if there's some theories that persist through time, regardless of the new introduction of data. For example, the theory of, I suppose it's not a theory, but the principle of gravity. It seems like to challenge that would be quite a paradigm shift. And even if new data appears, we would not think that it would overturn gravity. So I wonder if you're thinking about any particular areas of science, such as maybe ecology or biology, where some of this big data paradigm is changing in particular, or if you're thinking, yeah, are there some examples about that?
Oh, so first of all, I want to say that if I understand it correctly, gravity can be understood as a theory, gravity, like a theory of gravity. And unfortunately, um, it was replaced by a relative, how to say, relative theory, or general relatively theory by Einstein. So
Oh,
I actually I don't know the math in those two theory, and I didn't investigate. But
oh,
actually I look up, and as you said, a paradigm shift. Like I Google paradigm shift, and in Wikipedia, and one paradigm shift in physics is gravity theory uh, how to say, I don't think it's replaced and is
augmented.
substituted
Hmm.
by general relative general relative theory. So why this happened is because some observations in astrology, astronomy,
Mhm.
in physics, they cannot explain by gravity.
Mm.
So Einstein introduced general relative theory to explain. So if you are interested in paradigm shift, you can take a look at the Wikipedia page and even dive into those two theory and to understand better. But I know it's very theoretical and mathematical. It's very hard to understand. But I think if we assume Wiki is correct, then it is already a paradigm shift in physics about this theory.
Yeah, and I was asking that questions because I was curious about your research.
Okay, my
If you,
research. Oh, okay, I'll
yeah, yeah,
continue. That's just to
that was good.
okay. So for my research, I do computational social science. I'm more care about social science because like that's my background. And social science is I don't know. Some people say social science is soft science. I don't like this definition. It's maybe because of the pride in myself. I don't want to be high soft. I don't. That's I know. I know it's
Real.
it might be objective, but I don't like this judgment, and I don't like my research to be considered as soft science. But I don't want to argue about this subject. But I still want to say that social science is my subject, and I feel it's interesting because it's very important
Mm.
to for us to understand our society, because we need to understand people and society to design policy for people
That's
and for
right.
government for our society or even our world. So it's very
Mm.
important. And for social science, and we have many branches, and like for economics, psychology, and but what I do is that I focus on the computational techniques they use. So I want to make those computational techniques generalizable to new data. Like as we see that we have more and more data available, like we have emails, we have Twitter, we can even have uh, conference, like we have those video. What can we analyze? So
Mm.
given such data, so I my long-term goal is to apply computational techniques on those new emerged data, and make sure that those techniques are used in a generalizable way. So, or I will challenge the generalizability of these computation techniques. So that's my long-term plan. So because like we can see that many people study Twitter, many people study how to say uh, publications, they use computation techniques. But is this those computation techniques can guarantee the generalizability of the result to the population? We don't know. So that's my goal, and that's where I'm going.
Oh, that's so fascinating. I know I've read a little bit. I think Christine Hein does a lot with like virtual methods, it's called, and some of those techniques that you might use on these large social science computational corpuses. It also sounds like your work might overlap with a little bit of library science in the sense that people will do archival, like use computational techniques on the archives, um, and try to make those more accessible, like digital humanities and that kind of thing. Um, so I wonder, do you see a relationship between your interest in computational social sciences and the digital humanities at all?
Um, I feel it is related. Like I don't know the digital humanity, and I feel like according to my impression of this combination of word, I feel that they use computation techniques or they rely on computational power. But I would say that if they use computer techniques, they should be aware of the flaws in computation techniques and to make sure that those techniques uh, can truly help them. But I have to admit that it's very hard because even experts in computer science or physics, they develop computer techniques. They don't know if it works for the population because they didn't test. They test on a sample, right?
Right.
But as a researcher, like we hope we find a good result or a science that uh, reflect reflect the the underlying pattern or the ground truth.
Mm.
So even though it's hard, I would say that we can still try to push this way of research.
Okay, wow, that's awesome. I guess I have a final question for you, and this is a little bit more like backing up, but if you could have any sort of outcome of your work, what kind of change would you like to see as a result of your approaches in your work in research?
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't get it.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, no, that's fine. It's kind of a very broad question, but just to wrap up, um, how do you see, or what would you like to see of your work really making a big change, like a big impact? Is there something that you can imagine your work would really impact or have a change on? Like you mentioned policy earlier, but
Okay.
I wonder what you envision in your
Okay.
wildest dreams.
Okay, this is a very interesting question, and I can like I know it's a hypothetical question, so that I can say as broad as I can. So I feel like if I can really do this, and if it works well, I can let people know more about how they apply computation techniques and how they make conclusions. And if it works really well, I can show that this way of applying computation techniques is have certain flaws, then people will have to develop new computation techniques. But I'm not a computer scientist, but other people will be aware, oh, social science need a new technique. I think that will be a good outcome.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Oh, I love that. It's like AI human collaboration, but also like very self-aware AI
Mm.
collaboration. Oh, well, oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say? Um,
um, oh, I enjoy like this interview, like because like the pandemic, it's hard to talk to people. Like I sometimes I have to text people, like because sometimes I feel all lonely, but this time I feel really good because we can talk about the research we love, and we can look forward to the future, which we don't know if it is true.
we can dream of being in person, but also dream of fixing all the computational biases in
Yeah.
research. Oh, Well, thank you so much. This is always really, really fun. And full disclosure to anyone who's listening is that Han and I used to be right next to each other in the same sort of area within the iSchool, and so we were sharing a desk-ish space, and that was really nice. But since the pandemic, that hasn't been possible. So this is really refreshing and wonderful, and um, oh, you're doing such cool stuff. So thank you again, and hope we can see each other in person maybe pretty soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
hon. See you later. Bye.